Hi there, everybody. How are you? Good morning. So today we're going to be in Colossians chapter 3, verse 5. While you turn there, I'd like to point out Ashley. A lot of people have been asking. Ashley's doing pretty well. We're getting pretty close to a baby arriving. We think it's a baby. She was saying maybe it's a puppy. I don't think that's the case, but I don't know. And so, but we might actually have a baby today. So no sudden movements, no loud noises, please. Let's give it a couple more days, okay? I've got flooring to put down, so that's really of first importance right now. And so I apologize if I look a little tired. It's because I've been putting in flooring, not a lot, just a little bit. But I'm not a very active person, so that was enough to take it right out of me. Ashley's sitting there, she's helping me with stuff while I'm doing certain parts of the flooring, and I'm like, I think it's time for a break. She's like, a break? I've only been working for 15 minutes. Yeah, it's definitely break time. It's definitely time. I'm going to go take a nap. She's like, I wish you well in the future. All right, Colossians chapter 3. So, yeah, exactly. Thanks, bud. And so the last time I was here, we started out Colossians chapter 3, and when we look at where we've been coming, we're going to tell you what we're going to be talking about today. I want to go ahead and take some time and take a look back, because if you look at verse 5, the first part that we have here says, "Put to death, therefore." Okay, we got to stop right there. We're going to make it through this in no time, I promise. We've only made it 3 words and I'm already stopping. Therefore, anytime there's a therefore in the text, you want to go back and find out what it's there for. Let's go back to verse 1 and we'll reread, and I'll talk about what we talked about last time I was here. "Since then you've been raised with Christ. Set your heart on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory." Okay? The main themes that are going to carry on to our passage today that you need to be really paying attention to is, since you've been raised with Christ, put your hearts and your minds on things above, and for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. Those were the main points of what we talked about last time I was here. If you remember, I talked about how we have a baby on the way, obviously. We were just talking about that baby somehow knows me, because every time I touch my wife's belly, the baby stops moving. She instinctively knows I'm there, right? And we know from science that if I talk, she can hear my voice. So she knows who I am. But that baby will never know me in the womb the way she will when she's actually born. And she gets to see me face to face. She gets to experience me. That's the kind of picture Paul gave us last time I was here when he went through this passage. He said, when you're having to figure out what to put your heart into, what to put your life into, where to keep your mind, think about that day. You know God in part, but one day you will know him in the whole, right? And so that's that picture when we don't just see him in part, but we get to see him as the whole. And you might be asking yourself, well, what does this have to do with my everyday life? That's great, but how does that impact what I'm doing every day? How does it impact when I'm struggling? How does it impact when I'm trying to make it through life? And because of that, therefore, he's going to continue moving on, and this passage today is going to talk about that. And so we're going to have the first thing that he points out for us here is to look back at the previous passage, and then he says, make sure that you're worshiping the right God. "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming." And so, what does dying to our old selves look like? That's what he says the answer is. When you want to find out, what do I do to try to implement the death of Christ in my everyday life? What do I do? He says to put your old life to death. He says, putting to death these earthly natures. The terms listed here are broad junk drawer terms, right? There's nothing very specific here. He says very general things to give you an idea as to the kind of actions that are not becoming of somebody who's a Christian. And some of the, just to be clear here, the list that he gives us is sexual immorality, which is any sexual behavior outside of marriage, impurity, which is pretty straightforward, lust, and your translation may say passion. I like, passion is technically the right word. I like lust a little bit better because of the implications later on in the passage. But lust is this. It's channeling your desire through a source of fulfillment that was never designed to fulfill you, right? So the picture here might be when you're hungry and you go to the grocery store, it never ends well, right? Is that when when you're really hungry, you go to the grocery store, you're not like looking at your phone for YouTube videos of Gordon Ramsay looking to try something out that's going to take 2 hours to make? No. You're not there, right? You're like, whatever's pre-made, ready to go, chips. I like beef jerky, drives my wife crazy. She hates it. So, but that's the kind of thing I'd be getting is all that junk food, right? It never goes well. And then after you eat it all, you feel wonderful, right? No, you don't ever feel good about that. I don't ever feel good about that afterwards. I feel good in the moment. But junk food's not really meant to sustain you, right? If the whole world came to an end and all you had left was the junk food aisle, you'd have to get a little more creative. You'd have to have something else or else you'd be in real trouble, right? Similarly, lust is wanting something to fulfill you that's never going to provide you what you actually need. It feels good in the moment, it feels right in the moment, but it never fulfills you. Evil desires is allowing yourself to be directed based on the uncontrolled desire without properly channeling your desire. I said a lot of words there. When you have a desire, you have to think through the process of how should this desire be fulfilled? How should I rightly go about taking care of this desire? Because if you just react, our base nature is evil, right? Anybody with a 2-year-old understands this, right? Do you have to tell a 2-year-old, okay, I'm going to give you this toy. As soon as I give it to you, you're going to throw it at my face and yell at me? No, you don't. Will they do it? Probably, right? 2-year-olds will do something. Greed. Greed is placing the desire to acquire above the biblical approach of viewing all the things on this earth and all people as blessings, and that the people around us are part of our larger story. So it's placing, it's not viewing all the things in this world as blessing, but it says viewing them as things that you're going to fill your life with that are only for yourself, right? They're only for, they're over and above that biblical view. And then he says, which is idolatry at the end. What does he mean is idolatry? Is it greed? Is it evil desires? No, it's the whole list. You see, Paul doesn't stop here and say, just don't do these things. That's what we expect him to say, right? We expect him to say, here's all the things not to do, like, figure it out. Don't do them. We assume that's what he would say, but that's not what he says. He continues on and he says, this is idolatry. All of these items are corruptions of worship. Right? All of these things are, all of these desires that we have are good. But when we corrupt the fulfillment of our desires, we end up with sin. So let's take a look at some of these and see how these are actually idolatry. Let's look at sexual immorality. Sexual immorality is the worship of sex. Is sex bad? No, right? What do we tell junior hires? Sex is a horrible, awful thing, so save it for the person that you love, right? That's not the truth. It's a wonderful thing, but it's within certain confines. It's within certain parameters, and when you go outside that, you've decided to worship sex because what God has provided you isn't enough. Let's look at impurity. Impurity is impurity is failing to worship by defining your own world. It's by saying that you're going to be the master of how you process situations, that you're not going to look at the world with a biblical mindset. When we look at lust, is the worship of our earthly desires over and above a biblical fulfillment of those desires. And so, and then evil desires, worshiping those desires as well. And then greed is the worship of possessions and people for the sake of our own personal gain over and above the well-being of others and over and above the well-being of what God is trying to do inside of us. So all of these things are tied to worship. All of these things are worship issues. And he says at the end here that the wrath of God is coming. Why could he say that? The wrath of God is a big thing to bring up, right? Right? The worship of God, as opposed to idolatry, is a big deal. This is a very big deal. That's why the wrath of God is here, is to express to you how important this is, right? When I first heard this passage and I first read through this, I'm like, whatever. Evil desires, I'm not that bad of a person, it doesn't matter, right? But when you stop and you really think about this, we all have some piece of this hidden away inside of us, no matter where we are in our life, right? There's some area of our life that we can look at and we can point to and we can say, look, this has happened in my life. And we're tempted to say, well, because I'm better than other people or because I think I'm okay compared to where I used to be, it doesn't matter. And that's not the case, because these things are what required the death of Jesus. That is how important God takes these issues. God takes these issues so importantly that Jesus had to die for them. And this is not, right? When I say the wrath of God, what immediately pops in your head? If it's me, it's like all of the televangelists, right? Up there yelling and getting angry and getting upset. This passage is incredibly loving, because what he's doing at the end of this is he's saying God so much wanted you to succeed that he gave up everything for you to succeed. For the sake of his glory, he wants you to succeed. So we can look at the wrath of God and we can get upset and we can get defensive and we can say, I don't deserve that. Or we can step back and we can see the God that says, look, this is the standard, but I died. I came, I lived alongside you, I died the death you could never die, and lived the life that you could never live on your behalf, so that you do not have to face the consequences of your actions. That's an incredibly loving thing. And when you see that the wrath of God is coming and you are spared not because of what you've done, but because of what's been done for you, that's an incredibly joyous thing. How much relief do you feel in that? How much rest do you feel when you step back and you see that you don't have to face this alone. You don't have to go through this on your own. He says, be renewed. Verse 7, you used to walk in these ways in the life that you once lived. But now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge, in the image of its creator. No matter who you are, we all come from a place of sin. We all come from a place where this was us, even if we are no longer there, right? And even if we do become Christians, sometimes that follows you, right? That follows you into the next stage of your life. And so what do you do with that? He says you replace poor behavior, you take poor behavior and you replace it with the proper behavior. Anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language are not the problem. They're symptoms of the problem, right? So these things that we go to, these things that are reactions for us at time, right? You don't have an anger problem when you're sitting on the beach with a cold drink, right? That's not when your anger problems fly up, right? When you're trying to put in a new floor and you get mad because the guy who put in the old floor cut some corners and decided to go crazy with staples that you can't get out, and you spend approximately 47 hours pulling staples. Some of you are going to say that sounds like a real story. It came from a real place. I might have taken a little creative licensing with the timing, but it felt like every second of it. That's when you realize you have anger problems, right? That's when you realize, that's when it comes to the surface. In that moment, your choice is to say one of three things, okay? It's not me, it's the situation, so it doesn't matter, because I really am a good person. Anybody in this situation would fly off the handle and start throwing things and causing trouble. A second option is to say, I got angry, but it's going to be all right because I'm going to try harder to not be angry in the future. Or you can stop and ask yourself the question, and this is what Paul's asking us to do. Am I angry because I've stopped worshiping God with a certain part of my life? Now, some of you are thinking, Zach, this is silly. Really? Really? I just got angry. It's not a big deal. Who cares? I just wanted to really hurt somebody. It's okay. It's okay. I just said some things that were horribly inappropriate. It's going to be all right. These are not the problem. They show that there's something deeper going on. They show that there's an area of your life that you have not decided not to worship God with. You don't lie because lying is bad. You don't lie because it's inconsistent with your new identity. Remember what we were remembering from the previous passage? Your new identity. So if you feel like, if you become a Christian and you say to me, Zach, anger is not a big deal, my response to you is that portion of your life is in conflict with your new identity as a Christian. Your new self is renewed in the knowledge of the image of your Creator. By seeing who Jesus was, by seeing what Jesus did, we see what we're supposed to do. We see how we can move forward. And so how do we connect with this new identity? Paul talks about connecting with this new identity in chapter 2, verse 13. I'm going to go ahead and read it for you because we're getting short on time. When you were dead in your sins and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all our sins, having canceled the charge of our legal indebtedness, which stood against us and condemned us. He has taken it away, by nailing it to the cross and having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. You see, the problem in Colossae was that people were coming and they were saying, that's great if you want to be a Christian, but first you have to do all these other Jewish practices to be the next level Christian. You need to do these other things besides identify with Jesus. And what Paul says is, and they say, if you want to know more about God, you need to become a better person, right? Paul says that's not the truth. The truth is, in your sin, God came to you and he saved you. He offered to you what you needed despite what you've done, despite your action. This is an ongoing process that continues after salvation. We are saved by grace. We are perfected by grace as well. Just because you come to Jesus doesn't mean your life is going to be perfect. There's still going to be work from that point. I'm going to leave you with this picture. Imagine when we have my little baby girl, let's say at age 5, she comes home one day, and it's raining out like it was earlier this week, right? Horrible storm. And she takes her jacket off and she sits out in the middle of the yard with her jacket over her head and just sits there. And I, as a loving father, I come out to her and I say, What are you doing? And she says, well, Dad, I didn't pay for that house. I don't deserve to live in it. I'm going to find my own way. It's okay. I'm going to provide for myself from now on. I've realized the error of my ways. It's going to be okay. As a loving father, I don't look at her and then say, all right, good luck. Wish you well. I say, where you are in your life, you can't provide for yourself. You don't have the ability. Unfortunately, you can't do it. You have no credit. Nobody's going to rent to you. You have no money to put a down payment down on a house. You have no way of making any kind of money. Even if you sell lemonade, you got to sell a lot of lemonade. Ask Turkey Hill how much lemonade you got to sell to pay a mortgage. A lot. You can't do it. But in my kindness, in my love for you as a father, I've already bought a house that's big enough for all of us to live in. You can come inside. That's okay. You don't have to fight this battle. You see, when we come to God and we say, I'm going to try harder, do better, make my own way, we're saying the same thing to God. And it looks the same kind of way to God. I don't mean to speak down to you, but you don't have the ability to make yourself a good person. You don't have the ability to save yourself. You can't do that. But in His love and in His good knowledge, God is such a great Father that He's provided a way for you besides you having to do it yourself. And so, if you're here today and you say, I've never believed in Jesus, that's the first step. The first step is to come to Jesus in faith and to trust Him with your sin and to trust His sacrifice as enough for you. If you've been a Christian for years and you have an area of your life that is not completely given over to God, the solution is the same. You come to Jesus and trust that His sacrifice is enough for you. And so to both of you, He calls you to remember that He is a good Father and you will never outgrow the need that you have for Him. You will never outgrow that, but thankfully, He doesn't ask you to. He doesn't ask you to do it on your own. And one day, if you become a Christian, we will stand before him and we will see him face to face, and it will make so much more sense. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much that you have not left us on our own. I thank you that you have not called us to be better people by ourselves and to figure it out on our own. I thank you that you give us the power. I thank you that you give us the strength, and I thank you that your grace is what makes us able to change. I thank you that Jesus is our perfect picture of what it means to live in light of you and to live according to your call and to your purpose. I thank you so much for everybody here, and I pray for all of us as we leave here that you would continue to guide us, to guard us, to direct us, and that we would see you in the moments that you're moving in our lives. In your Son's name, amen.